Hey TV fans, I am bored now. I am back with you today to talk about the West Wing Season 1 Episode 7. The episode is called The State Dinner. It originally aired on the 10th of November 1999. This one was directed by Thomas Schurum and it's written by Aaron Sorkin and also Paul Radford. So it got a Nelson rating of about 13.66 and the IMDb rating is a pretty respectable 8.2. It's the first episode we see Abigail Bartlett, played by Stockard Channing, so she is the First Lady, Jed's wife, and she really becomes a big part of the show and some of the drama around the president, partly because of his condition, which we later find out about. And this is a really great debut, I think, because it really typifies, that's not a word, it typifies Abby's sort of power and strength and how she really has to deal with not just the president, his office, but also what comes with that on a day-to-day basis. And what we see in this episode from Abigail is a very strong-willed, very honest, portrayal and reaction to the president as he tries to juggle these several things. So in the episode, you've got an issue with the Teamsters going on strike, a storm which is putting lives in danger, including FBI agents who have been sent to help out. There's a political protest. Indonesian Prime Minister who is on a state visit to the White House. That's where the State Dinner of the title comes from. And that's what some of the protests are about, his appearance and the fact that he particularly in the politics of Indonesia at this point don't have the best track record when it comes to the FBI. So you've got all these different things going on in the episode, and that's what I really like about Abigail Bartlett's appearance in this and how Stockard Channing gets that across, because you see a woman who is very frustrated, at times very angry, which we don't see so much in this episode. You just get a brief sort of snapshot of how she feels. But when she meets Sam's friend / girlfriend Laurie, she does have a way of being quite sort of sharp-tongued about, he's trying to balance everything again, he's trying to please everyone and save the world. But then later on you see how proud she is of her man as well, and how she will stand behind her man. And that is a theme in this episode, in this series almost, that you do see these great women and how often some of the men in their lives can't really shine, or they just wouldn't be effective without them. But at the same time, we see a lot of progress in terms of what women can be as well. Good first appearance for her, I think, and the scene with her, Laurie and Sam is very nicely done. You see a lot of the charm and appeal of Abigail Bartlett.
Mrs. Bartlett, good evening.
Are you enjoying yourself?
Yes.
Sam?
Yes.
Wouldn't you like to introduce me to your friend?
Okay.
Mrs. Bartlett, I'm Brittany Rollins.
Abigail Bartlett.
It's an honor to meet you, ma'am.
Oh, aren't you sweet? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Actually, I was looking for the president.
He had to step out to the West Wing. I'm not sure why, but I could go.
To pistol whip the trucking industry.
Why would he?
Because he can't save a gunshot victim and he can't stop a hurricane. You are thoroughly charming.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
That was incredible.
I'm just gonna eat, if that's okay. I'll give you $10,000 not to go home with that guy tonight.
Laurie is being called Brittany in that scene because that's her name and identity for that night by the person she's been hired to appear at the state dinner, which was unbeknownst to Sam because they had a cute little meet up in the diner earlier in the episode. So once again, we see that Laurie is still studying at law school to be a lawyer and still looking to get out of her night job, which Sam doesn't approve of course. Sam tries to give her some tips, but he's actually quite patronising. He also trained in law, and he has this blasé kind of comment about how in reality very little of what you learn in law school will actually stand you in good stead for being a lawyer. I have no idea if that's true or not, but Laurie rightfully points out then, yeah, but you've still got to pass the exam. Sam is being a little bit blasé and dismissive, and once again when she appears and he finds out she's the date for this guy who's a little bit on the sleazy side. He's probably not the worst sleaze you've ever seen in the world of politics or the West Wing, but he is definitely a little bit on that kind of side and definitely below Laurie. And you can understand it if Sam has got caught up by this girl and generally cares about her. But Laurie quite rightly points out then, hey, this isn't any of your business. This is my business. It's how I make a living until I'm in a position where I can no longer do it. So once again, early episodes, Sam does come off a little bit too kind of blunt and a little bit too much blasé. In the episode about how she once again stands behind Josh and supports him. This episode definitely is dancing between comedic and more serious pointed drama and satire, because there's this whole thing with Donna where she has to come up with a translator and she finds is struggling, doesn't appear to actually speak that, even though he's a translator, and Toby is kind of bashing him a little bit for not adding another language, speaks English, so they didn't need a translator in the first place. So there's some cute little moments of comedy weaved into the more serious, dramatic stuff. But we also get some, speaking of the women of the episode, we get some vintage CJ in this, and it's an opening scene which really sets the table, I think, for what the episode is going to be when she's having this conversation to the press, particularly a fashion magazine who seem to care more about what the Indonesian representation will be wearing that evening rather than some of the serious issues surrounding them.
The First Lady will be wearing a Carmen Mark Volvo silver and black gown with a matching bolero jacket.
Shoes.
I believe she'll be wearing shoes, yes.
CJ.
Black suede and velvet Manolo Blahnik slides with a rhinestone and mother of pearl buckle.
Accessories.
Gabrielle Sanchez freshwater pearl necklace with tourmaline beads. I'm also told to inform you she will be carrying a Christina Bamba silk-pleated organdy drawstring evening bag.
And Mrs. Seguro?
Mrs. Segura will be wearing a traditional silk kagaya in dark purple with an overlay of black silk lace.
CJ.
Matching open-toe evening slippers. Her jewelry is by an artist from her birthplace, which is Jakarta. It is fashioned in rubies and gold. Anything else? Nothing on the nuclear test ban treaty. Love it when In Style magazine has issued press credentials. Yeah. Mirabella needed to know what wine was being served at the fish course, so it's a good thing I went to school for 22 years.
What wine are we?
It's wine. You'll drink it.
Okay.
What do you need?
Sarah's picked up speed and power and has now been classified as a Class 4 system. You might want to talk about preparations and contingencies.
Sure. What are we talking about?
Hurricane Sarah.
Sarah's a hurricane.
Yes.
Where's it heading?
Georgia and parts of the Carolinas.
When?
It'll hit landfall by tonight.
Is it serious?
You ever been in a hurricane?
No.
Me neither, but they look pretty serious.
So, let me see if I have this. A hurricane's picked up speed and power and is heading for Georgia. Management and labor are coming here to work out a settlement to avoid a crippling strike that'll begin at midnight tonight. And the government's planning a siege on 18 to 40 of its citizens, all the while we host a state dinner for the president of Indonesia.
Yeah.
You got it. Amazingly, you know what I'll get asked most often today?
What?
Sandra?
I'm sorry, CJ.
Black suede and velvet Manolo Blahnik slides with a rhinestone and mother of pearl toe buckle.
Thanks.
No problem.
CJ is often one of the bluntest characters and one of the best at calling out some of the contradictions of modern day politics and also the way the press treats politics. So that was a great example of her frustration, but how she brings a little bit of sarcasm to it, which is quite pointed, which I do like. And it's something this episode does pretty well. It gets the mix between, you know, this awkward cringe situation, but also bringing a little bit of a humour to it. So there's a good scene actually with the president taking like photo opportunities with the president of Indonesia, and this is a funny like scene which is quite relatable to people where like they don't really want to be in the same room with each other, and that's something this episode is tapping into, how sometimes even the most liberal president and White House regime will have to deal with these kinds of characters, but how you just sort of grin and bear it. And I think how sometimes you hope to make progress by at least engaging with them, and it's a way in so you can try and work at the politics side of it like gently. But yeah, you just get this amusing scene where like the press keep asking the president of Indonesia questions. He doesn't really reply. That like Jed Bartlett keeps asking him questions, and all he says is yes or no occasionally, but sometimes he doesn't even respond. And yeah, it just sums up this very like I said, quite an awkward but realistic kind of like dialogue you sometimes have with certain people where neither of you want to be in the room and the other person just isn't playing ball. So there is a lighter side to it, even though some of the like very real like human rights issues that are coming out of this. CJ, speaking of her, also has a very cute like interaction with Danny in this episode. He gets quite excited to see her in her dress as they're heading towards the state dinner, and he's very honest, like, hey, I just like to flirt with you. But their chemistry and their slow burn relationship is always very cute and fun, and they're still negotiating really the terms of it and can they make it work and what's appropriate at certain times because of him being a member of the press corps. But there's some solid stuff in this with them too. I'm just going to say it. CJ is my MVP of the episode. I think some of the weaker stuff is with like Josh and with Mandy, because they are squabbling a little bit, like because there's this idea of how to deal with the protesters, and Mandy like kind of trying to say that we can't just go in all guns a-blazes, we have to deflume the situation, and Josh and Toby are kind of like trying to come at it from the point of view as sometimes you have to take that approach to national security, and Josh does get quite frustrated when the president takes Mandy's side, and when things turn a little bit ugly later, Mandy is like just devastated. But some of that stuff is a little bit one note. It's the weaker stuff of the episode, and I think in the episode Josh does come off as quite sort of petty in like his ongoing thing with Mandy, where he doesn't really want her to be involved in like actual policy, or he wants her to be as little as possible. And there's this thing about Mandy saying, it really bothers you, then the president might take my advice, and he's like, yes it does, and it's again, it's all very awkward. But some of them squabbling I do think is a little bit petty and doesn't really work in the episode, because the fallout of that is the negotiation with the representation of Indonesia, and when the FBI, a member of the FBI, has been kidnapped, and because they've made this speech at the dinner. It's funny, you don't actually see the dinner, you just see events leading up to it and approaching it. Maybe that's another little critique, is they could have shown the actual dinner scene, because there's quite a nice scene between Toby and Sam when they're debating the nature of the speech the president should make. Like, should he actually address some of the human rights issues? Should he approach that in the actual language? And Toby's in favour of doing that, and Sam is it's not so much. He says, no, that's not really appropriate. And in the end, Toby pushes forward and he does do that. And that's something which the Indonesian representative sort of throws back in his face later on. He brings up, I'm not sure a country who wiped out Native American culture really should be preaching on human rights. Now, Toby does concede that point, but he also brings up the speech and says, well, you made a mockery of my president just because you could. And he refuses to step in and to try and get the FBI guy freed. And Josh then says, we'll talk to the French then. We'll have ongoing thing. So you're definitely meant to feel, okay, this guy is smarmy and he's a villain, even though he has a kernel of the point in the scene. So that stuff is also quite interesting. But this episode does juggle quite a lot, and it doesn't quite hit all the marks. Like, maybe at times it's trying to juggle a little bit too much. But the episode does end in a very powerful way, and it really sells the position of the president and what he has to go for, because he's had a hell of a day trying to balance all this, and then he has to take a call. He has contact with one of the people who have been out to help in the storm, this like volunteer who's in danger. He's injured himself and he's not sure if he's going to make it by how bad the storm is. And this is just a very simple but very moving dramatic scene where you've got the various characters huddled around the president, and the president is on the radio talking to this guy who I guess is quite a young guy. And you get the occasional like wisecrack from the president, which he likes to do to like lighten the mood. But it's just a very simple, effective shot. You see almost this family type thing, how much the president's inner circle is like a family in supporting him. And I think just having the sound of the storm crackling over the radio makes it even more kind of impactful and sort of moving. But how the president says, I'm going to stay on the line as long as the communication holds up and before I fade out. So he keeps talking to him at this difficult time. So it's a really poignant type scene, and it's the perfect way to end the episode. So the episode has a real high point at the start, it has a high point at the end, some solid stuff in the middle, and there's some stuff which I'm not so keen on, which is a little bit up and down, but it definitely makes some good dramatic points, I think, during the episode. So it's a tough one to rate. I think I'll go 6.5 for this one, because it is a little bit choppy, but there's some strong dramatic stuff and some solid character stuff. It's just not quite. I think the points that really hit, but there's some stuff which is a little bit on the weaker side and maybe could have been sort of weeded out. But there you have it. That's the State Dinner, the West Wing, episode 7 of the show, and I'll be back soon with episode 8. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. Support me on patreon.com/borednow for a bunch of extras, including exclusive commentaries and clips and previews and things like that. But thanks for watching. Keep watching TV. See you guys soon. Goodbye.